Joining us for today's episode of the Social Stay Show is Peter Stark, Executive Creative Director of AV Print, the new print division at AV Squad. Beneath the laid-back exterior of one of my favorite spiritual gurus and a great mentor lies the heart of a creative powerhouse. Peter's vision has driven print campaigns for shows such as Game of Thrones and the Saw movie franchise. He's worked with the biggest stars in the biz like Denzel Washington and Will Smith, but always finds the time to return all the emails, offer a bit of advice, attend blind portfolio reviews, hoping to discover new talent, and do it all in a kind and humble manner. He's one of my favorite people to run into in LA. And today, I'm happy to introduce him to our viewers. Thanks for joining us, Peter.
Happy to be here.
Awesome, man. You really are one of my favorite people to run into. I always come away with whatever our discussions in a better mood than I usually came into. And I just want to hear a little bit about your backstory, just from your humble beginnings of you were talking a little bit of just your past in the Peace Corps and just being curious about other natures and other people. So if you could tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I got started really late. I had no idea what I wanted to do until I was 20, in my mid-20s, late 20s. The Peace Corps was sort of a game changer for me. I graduated with a marketing degree from Drake University, and literally the day after I graduated, I realized I had to go buy a suit, and that scared the shit out of me, and I was like, all right, this is probably not the right course for me. So I was 4 years into a degree, and just really at that point had sort of a midlife crisis at 21 years old. And fortunately, I had parents who supported my journey, and I told them straight up, I'm like, I don't want to go work for Target or Pillsbury. You know, I grew up in Minneapolis, and that was what it meant to be a marketing, guy. And so sort of as a fallback, I'd heard a friend of mine had gone to the Peace Corps, and I was like, that sounds cool. And so I applied, got accepted. Long story short, changed my life in a lot of ways. But I came out of that as a 25-year-old with a marketing degree and absolutely no desire to get into marketing, and a whole new set of values and a whole new set of desires and this and that, and met my now 25-year wife.
Okay.
Well, that's weird. Let me back up on that. Met my wife, who I've been married to now for 25 years.
Okay.
And we went to school. She went to get her MBA, and I took a couple of design classes and was into it. And so applied to go to school at BFA in New York. We moved down to the city from upstate New York, and we landed in the Village. We were caretaking a bed and breakfast, and rather than just sitting on my hands for 6 weeks, I threw some resumes out into the world, and got zero response, and had no book and really no business trying to start my career in New York at that point. But my wife took one look at my resume and said, this is boring as fuck. Put something into the resume that actually says who you are, talks about your dreams, makes an impact, gets people to look twice at it.
Engagement.
So and that was really the beginning of how I sort of started to re-envision what my career could be. And I wrote a resume that said I want to change the world with my design, which was the most pretentious bullshit thing I could have ever written, because I had done nothing up to that point. But as fate would have it, my future boss looked at that and said, all right, I want to see what this looks like, So he hired me, and that was it was a great job. I was working in Tribeca, on Canal Street, and looking up at the city, and working on Miramax film jobs and HMB Records and Blue Note Records. And I mean, it was just that kind of got me started, you know, but yeah, that was kind of a long-winded short story.
That's a great one, man. Like it's like so looking at that, so basically you were on to your second career, like you adjusted and adapted from the first and kind of steered onto more of what you wanted to do and then kind of became inspired and like I don't know, what was it like a bit of hustling your second career in New York? Like
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it was my first career because I hadn't done anything till then.
Correction.
Yeah, but
Gotcha.
I mean, I had managed to basically fuck off my whole 20s, but I had done really cool things and learned a lot about who I was. And so going into, I think the thing I was most afraid of going into a marketing career was I had no idea who I was and what I wanted. And so like jumping into a career, you know, that early on when I didn't know who I was or what I wanted seemed scary to me. And in hindsight, it was the best decision I made to learn about myself before I jumped into a career. And so New York was, you know, I landed at sort of the perfect job, got to work on with great clients, with a great mentor, one of the best, Paul Brown, who's still one of my greatest mentors and one of the best design guys I know. He's in LA now, but yeah, rather than going to school, I ended up doing this job where I was learning the things I would have learned in school and getting paid a little bit of money for it. So, yeah, I don't know if I answered your question though.
That's okay. I mean, it's like basically a paid graduate program to a certain extent. And what was that job?
It was a place called Bauda Design. It was a little boutique agency. There were 3 of us, and 2 of us did creative, and the other dude was kind of the account money guy. But we did some damage. Like we worked on Foo Fighters. We worked on a lot of Blue Note stuff. Yeah, Paul was just a genius. Like at that point, I was 29 and I was a junior designer. Paul was 25 and he had been a creative director at Capitol Records, had graduated from design school at 20, graduated from high school at 16. So I sort of learned from a dude who was way ahead of the game and I was about 10 years behind. But in hindsight, again, like jumping into something when you're 28, 29 years old and being 10 years behind really sort of motivated me. And
yeah, it makes you give focus.
Yeah.
Because like I said, when we were kind of talking about my career, like coming from snow sports and outdoor sports and then having to move to New York and reinvent. It was funny as my mentor, Monty, he's like, you're like that old guy in the front of the classroom who's always asking all the questions and who's there to learn.
Yeah.
And so it does create that focus because, I mean, like, if I'd moved to New York in my 20s, I would have been a hot mess. Like, I would have never gotten anything done.
Yeah.
But, you know, but you get there and you know what you want to do, so that's a really a focus on what you want to do, which brings me to my next question is, with the work that you're doing and doing so much poignant piece and the times that we're in right now, I wanted to ask you about some of your intersections of advertising and activism with some of the films and posters and projects that you've worked on.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been really blessed to work at agencies and work with amazing clients, you know, HBO, Netflix, A24, where I've gotten to work on projects with substance, you know. We got to work on, we had the really great fortune of working on a project called The 13th back in the day.
Ava DuVernay.
Right. When you get to work on jobs like that, and we just worked on a project here at AV Squad called AKA Jane Roe.
Okay.
The history and story behind, obviously, the
Roe versus Wade.
Roe v. Wade, and we worked on a series called Pride, which is, you know, the whole history of the whole LGBTQ movement, and you know, when you get to work on jobs like that, where it's going out to the world and it's going to educate people on things that they may or may not know about, you know, those are when you get to work on a job like that, you have an extra responsibility. And you know, I've also worked on lots of jobs where it's just straight entertainment, and it's, you know, I don't always know the value it's going to have socially or how conscious it is, but you know, when you do get to work on those jobs that you know are going to have an impact, you know, it makes you appreciate what we do.
Well, like the 13th is educating people right now in the civil rights movement, and it's just something like that's been out for like years, and like your work is pivotal in showing people they may not even know what they're getting into when they sit down in front of the TV.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, by the time they get up for a bathroom break, their minds and perspective have completely changed on the world, and it came to you under the guise of entertainment.
Right.
But also, like, you're helping change the world.
Yeah, and I got to give credit where credit's due. Like, those projects, those documentaries are, we're not creating those documentaries,
no, for sure.
right? So that's where it's a blessing. Like when that kind of job comes across your table, you're just like, oh my God, I gotta just like do right by this documentary or do right by this piece of entertainment. But with the 13th, for instance, you know, there were people that may not have known what that meant.
Yeah.
You know, when they saw the 13th, they may not have known what that alluded to, or they may not have been interested in that necessarily, or vaguely interested but not willing to spend 2 hours or whatever watching that documentary. And so, you know, our job when we get something that like that is to create a piece of art that is provocative enough for people to go, oh man, you know, I don't know what this is, but I want to watch it.
Yeah,
you know,
like
and then they watch it and it's like, wow, I'm glad I watched that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's one of those things to scroll through the selected for you, and it's just like the artwork catches you, and like, and then you hit the trailer. But I mean, like, it's just that it's that gateway to education,
right? And
helping people learn. And also, like, I mean, it's one thing that's really interesting to me, and just as far as like a mass media percentage, especially with people's short attention spans, the fact that we are intersecting with people so quickly, so fast-paced, and the attention spans are so short that if you create something that's pivotal, that you actually can grab people and hold them for that long enough for them to learn and make a progressive change in their life because of what they've seen, either through the artwork and then continuing on down through the show. So it is really important, you know, what we're doing, you know.
Yeah, first impression can make or break.
For sure.
So that's what we get to do. We get to make a first impression.
That's awesome. So another question I have for you in that, and coming at it from a different way, because you said a lot of clients come to you, and I just kind of want to run down the list of the people you work for, because we've got Universal Pictures, Warner Brothers, Focus, HBO, Hulu, Netflix, FX, A24, Bethesda, Sony, and Shudder. So what I want to know, and what's curious to a lot of people who want to know the work behind the scenes and how, you know, pull back the veil, is like, how do you go about pitching concepts, you know, from pitching to completion? And what's that process look like? What's that step for you, step by step?
Yeah, it really depends on where you're at. Like, for instance, I got my start here in LA at an agency called Art Machine.
Okay.
And it's still an existing shop. It's merged with a bigger company now, and it's a very different, like the two creative forces behind the original Art Machine are no longer there. So it's a different company. But when I was with them, you know, I got to work on some really cool Lionsgate projects, you know, and so I created a relationship as one of the, you know, producers and one of the senior art directors there, who had some success with those jobs. I got to meet the client, and then when I moved on from Art Machine and went to a bigger company, I had that relationship, you know, and so that was I'm not going and seeking out a job from somebody who didn't know me.
Okay.
And when I was at the bigger company, BLT, I was given relationships, right? Like I maintained relationships, and I developed, you know, like stronger relationships, hopefully, ideally. But I was given a lot of those relationships. And then from BLT, I moved on and helped start a company called Bond, where we had to kind of start from scratch. And there were literally 6 of us sitting around a table trying to figure out how we were going to compete against 200-person BLTs of the world. And so we had to really hustle a lot harder and do some cold calling and lean into relationships we had created. So it's really a relationship game.
Okay.
Very rarely can you just reach out and say, hey, you don't know who I am, but please give me, you know, the keys to your campaign. You know, like that doesn't happen very often. It's usually based on experience, based on relationships, you know. So the longer you're in the game, the easier it gets a little bit. But, you know, each time you start something like, you know, we're 6 people now at AV Squad, the print department. The AV side of it is very robust and has a great history and has been doing great work for, you know, 12, 13 years. And they're kind of in the place that we were in some of the other places. But as a print department, excuse me, we're literally 6 months into this, 7 months into it. So we're having to lean into relationships that we've created over the years. And yeah, so that's a long-winded answer to your question, but it really is, it's based on relationships, you know, and the work you do is important, but, you know, it's leaning into relationships.
Well, can you tell me a little bit about, like you were just talking earlier about like just creating the vibe of like who you are as a person and what you get in equity by coming here and what that knowledge and breadth of experience is by who you are. And so I think that's an interesting thing of coming at it from a cold call perspective, but then showing the potential of what you can do and just getting people excited about your work.
Yeah.
So maybe you can tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're selling ourselves as AV Squad Print, AV Print, right? And 8 months ago, nobody had ever heard of that, right? And so we get a little bit of goodwill from the fact that we're coming from a company that's established itself as a really good brand.
Okay.
But as a print team, we can't lean into that too hard, and so we really have to prove ourselves with our work until we have a big body of work out in the world, and it's happening, but it doesn't happen right away. You know, we have to kind of sell ourselves a little bit on what we've done in the past, but really about who we are and what our vision is for the future, right? And so what we can do is sell our vibe. We can sell like who we are as people, you know, and again, nobody's gonna hand you the keys to their campaign because you're a cool person, but it doesn't hurt, you know, and it doesn't hurt to have like a vision and to be, you know, during the whole coronavirus thing, we've sent out a couple of promos, and these promos are not about like, hey, give us work, because we know the work is not really happening right now. So what it is, hey, we're thinking about you, and here's a Spotify playlist that might make you happy, and here's a recipe to a really great drink, and here's a book that we're really interested in, and here's some artwork that we've done, and you know, so you're trying to create goodwill, you know, and trying to let people know like what your intentions are and who you are as a person. But to be honest with you, in the end, it's going to be, you're going to have to do great work or you're not going to get hired. So,
well, I think it's interesting to look at how you're going about reaching out to people and connecting through passions rather than like, this is what I've done. And so hearing about that and finding that alignment for what you are and what they're maybe trying to create and achieve, and aligning those passions. And sometimes, you know, like when you just meet people and those alignments happen quickly, maybe that's the route where people decide like, okay, we want to go with these guys because that alignment happens so quick. And like, you know, when you just meet people and like all of a sudden your thoughts are just like, right in there, and like you just know, like it's like, I mean, like my buddy Jeff over here, like we like literally like we can nod at each other and kind of like talk and pick up at what we're going about doing, and it just makes the whole creating experience go so much faster, quicker, and sometimes he sees what's in my head, even though without me having to go to describe it. And like, maybe that's the way it works for you when you're going to a new client or that, like you all of a sudden see what's in their head. And like, I know it's like, it's amazing when like people have these visions inside their head, but they don't know how to get it out.
Right.
And like you being able to talk that vision out of them and then put it out and lay it out for them like that. And it's like, it makes you go like, okay, this person can get in my head and lay out this creativity for me. That's who I want to work with.
Yeah, man, it's really, it's all about communication, right? Like what we're doing is we're communicating in the print world. We're communicating something with an image or with a copy line, or, you know, and what we're you know, the product that we're selling is another form of communication, whether it's a documentary or a feature film or a TV show or whatever. So like the ability to be able to communicate is what we're all striving for, right? And so like if you can break through with a potential client or with an existing client and you can communicate with them and there's a heart connection there, I think people are gonna, pretty much all of us that are doing this at a higher level are, I think we can all do it. Like we were talking about this before the cameras were rolling, that like we can all do this, you know, but it's like, it's the ability to really communicate and connect that takes it to the next level, right?
Push the creativity higher.
Right. And so like that's so true with clients as well, is like, I think they're gonna pretty much trust that if you're at this level and you're starting a company or starting a division in a company, that you've got some abilities, you've got some experience, you've got some history, but can you connect, right? And we're, as people, that's what this is all about, right? And so like going back to the whole vibe thing is like if we can all do this, what takes us to the next level, and what are people going to be comfortable giving you their job for, you know? And if they know that you can communicate well and they know that you can do your job well and you've got that heart connection, then I think that makes it less scary, you know?
So that brings me to my next question, and I was curious about how have key art and assets changed in the digital age? Because I mean, you obviously started in a time where, you know, print was the de facto way of doing movie posters, but now like you've got so many different 360 campaigns with digital and social media and, you know, just, I don't know, different assets as far as like Quibi doing small short film and then YouTube and those forms. So how have things changed for you?
Yeah, it's a really, it's not an easy question to answer because in some regard, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And in another regard, things are completely different. You know, like, I mean, I can remember since, I mean, I've been doing this now for 20 some years. And I remember having conversations when I first started that, you know, it's just a tick, it's a matter of time before print dies. Print is dead, right? Like, it's not dead. Print is never gonna die in that regard. But you know, I mean, it evolves, but it, you know, and same thing for like home entertainment. Like, I mean, I look at home entertainment, and for years people have been saying home entertainment's dying because there's no Blockbuster and there's no this and that, and everything is on demand and streaming and this and that, and yet, you know, there's still vibrant, healthy home entertainment divisions out there and companies out there. So, but on the other hand, like, yes, like as we've seen during this, even just the last 6 months during this whole coronavirus thing, is the streamers are crushing right now, and the studios are sort of on pause a little bit, and so that you're seeing things that where the sort of the mecca of all like poster print worlds was the in-theater poster, right? Nobody's looked at an in-theater poster for 6 months, you know, and yet we're still creating key art. So key art is key art, and I think the evolution of print is kind of, it's gone from being something that gets printed on a piece of paper to just a still image. That really is, to me, what print is it's a still image as opposed to a moving image, right? And so there's always going to be a need for still imagery, you know? And whether that just be like a banner ad or whether that be a in-theater poster or the billboard you see out on Sunset, you know, like, there's always going to be a need for that. So, yeah.
So what poster campaign has had the most significance for you? And then what is one that you've worked on that has the most significance for the world, per se?
That's a really good question. And I even knew this question was coming, and it's tricky. For different reasons, you know, there were things that personally, to me, were significant for my career. You know, the Saw campaign was, that was the first time I ever won an award for something I had done, And I mentioned to you that our client sent us a case of Dom Perignon because the film had cost them $1 million to make, and it made $100 million in theaters and went on to become the biggest grossing and most popular horror franchise in the history of horror franchises.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I mean that to me was, and you know, when I saw that poster spoofed on The Simpsons, I was like, I think I just made it. I think I can retire.
It was like a slow pat on the back.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was because it was iconic, and we sort of changed the look of horror posters by doing a still life on a white background and clean and elegant and gross, but still like, you know. And so I realized at that point that, you know, one, a lot of people were seeing the work that I did, and people gave a shit about it, and even though the content of that franchise was like nothing to write home about, and wouldn't want my kids necessarily to see those things, but it was from like a marketing perspective, it was significant. And then there were things, you know, like getting to work on the 13th, you know, like, and how important that film was, and getting a piece of art out in the world. I worked on the This Is It, and that was my poster, and right after Michael Jackson had passed, and you know, like, you know, there's a lot of information out in the world about Michael Jackson right now, but back in the day, like, he was one of the most influential pop musicians in the history.
I mean, to
pop
this
music.
day still, you know.
Right.
I mean, like, it's like, again, it's like, I mean, there are the allegations and things, but I mean, the fact is he sold a lot of records.
Well, and he was
just
just a genius, you know. And so getting to work on that was significant for me personally. You know, more recently, I mean, we did the Ready Player One campaign, and that's a piece of entertainment that is, to me, is really like, it's entertainment, but there's also a message there, and that campaign was one of the hardest campaigns I've worked on, but like, you know, the client that I worked on was amazing. John Stanford at Warner Brothers was amazing to work with. And
why was it so hard?
It was a really significant film. It was a mixture of animation and you know, photography, and just trying to figure out, as we worked on it, they were developing assets, and there was just so much content there, and there were so many different directions we could go, and you know, we ended up putting 10 or 12 pieces of art in the world, and everything from like illustrations to, you know, photoreal comps to hybrids, and the process was amazing and very like linear and productive, but it just was like, it was a hard one to figure out how to sell that movie. Joker was, you know, I read the Joker script and realized how significant that was, not just for the fact that it was one of the most iconic villains in the history of all movie making, but it really had a message, really an important message on mental health. And, you know, so the weight of like going into that, going, oh my, we got to do this justice, like that, you know, and then seeing we had 8 or 9 pieces go out into the world on that, and it was just a really gratifying experience from that point of view.
I mean, Joker was such a delicate vignette of society right now, and I remember walking out of that film and just being like, whoa, like, what are we doing? What's going on? Where are things that are sliding through the cracks? And just seeing that, and seeing the posters that you guys created, really giving a type of feeling of brevity, you know, like of just like thought, and so simple but poignant.
Yeah, I think that, yes, I agree 100%. I think the probably the most significant campaign in terms of like being game changing because my focus has really shifted from my own personal success to the success of teams that I'm leading, to the success of companies and divisions that I'm helping to create, right? And so, you know, I think from that point of view, we sort of like finagled our way into the opportunity to work on the Jurassic World campaign, not the last one, but the one before that, with one of my favorite clients in the world, Patrick Starr from Universal Pictures, and he gave us an opportunity to basically just do some sketches for maybe another agency to build, and I worked that out so that if we did the sketches, if he liked any of the sketches, he'd at least give us the opportunity to build on those, and we built the shit out of them, and came up with some really great pieces of art that were all going to be released on Easter weekend, and they all died in one phone call when Steven Spielberg decided he wasn't going to release any posters. And I saw sort of the dreams and the trajectory of this company that I was working for at that time kind of go down the drain a little bit, all in one phone call, like literally. And then 3-4 weeks later, he changed his mind and decided to release all the artwork. Long story, but and that really changed the trajectory of that company, you know. And so there's significance in that kind of a campaign. There's social significance. There's personal significance. Like, so that I've got a lot of answers for like what my favorite campaigns are, or the most, like, you know, all out there, all for different reasons. That,
but you
know,
forgot one so far.
What's that?
You forgot one.
Oh, Game of Thrones.
Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. Well, that was significance because I sort of was able to bookend that whole series, and that's not really my genre. Like, I'm not a fantasy dude at all. And
you just have the hair of a wizard.
Well, I mean, right. I mean, looks can be deceiving, but yeah. So when I found out that I was going to be on that job with HBO, when I was working at a different company, I boned up on that as quickly as I could. And if you're a Game of Thrones fan, you know that you don't really bone up on that really quickly, because the first book is like this thick, and there's 50 different characters you got to learn. And so, like, I learned all that as quickly as I could. I went to Belfast to do the shoot. Got to meet, my last name is Stark, and I got to meet Ned Stark character, and that broke the ice. And I actually have a poster. I don't know if you can see it in the frame, but of me sitting in the throne from that first season. And you know, I think people thought it was going to be big, but nobody had any idea how big it was going to be. And you know, I was given the good fortune of being able to work on 6 of the 8 seasons of that, between a couple of different places I worked, and personally got to do the art for the first campaign, and the art that I did for the last campaign was chosen as well. So that was like a really gratifying 8-year experience, you know.
That's so crazy. Just like thinking about like you putting so much of your life into that show and being a part of it, and just, I don't know, that's out of control.
Yeah, it doesn't happen very often, but yeah, that was a good one.
And it's just funny because thinking about, everyone knows that campaign. Like, everyone, you know, like, you can't, like, I remember going to, like, HBO just relocated their offices in Hudson Yards. Yeah. And they have a chair when you walk into the building, you know, and it's just like, that's that iconic of a big thing that they have the Game of Thrones chair in their headquarters. Yeah. So it's just an interesting thing. It's kind of like the Simpsons moment, you know? So it's just funny thinking about me sitting there, and like, of course, everyone goes like, because it's the funny thing about it, it's like, it's a viral thing, right? Yeah. And so everyone that goes into HBO's office goes there and takes their picture in the chair.
Right. It's an icon. It's a cultural icon.
So it's a funny, amazing kind of like random thing.
That's a cool thing of what we do, right? There's like, you know, our art gets so much exposure, you know, and that's one of the kind of the cool things about this career, is that if you do something right, you know, 100 million people may see that, you know, and that's kind of bizarre and crazy. Just a real quick backstory, and you can edit this out later if you want, but the first season Game of Thrones campaign, we went and did a shoot. You know, it was a very expensive, very complicated shoot with all the characters and that. came back, worked on the campaign for about 3 months. And the week before they needed to lock their campaign, they killed the campaign. So what ended up being the key art for season 1 was the client calling me up and saying, Peter, are you sitting down? And I said, yeah, what's up? And Chris Spadaccini was his name, one of the great marketers. He's still at HBO, one of my favorite people, one of the best marketers out there. He said, you got to be sitting down, because what I'm going to tell you right now is no bullshit. They killed the campaign, but we got to solve it this weekend, and I'm coming. He was out in New York. He said, I'm coming to LA, and we're going to solve it. So over the weekend, he and I sat and kind of re-envisioned the campaign and came up with what ended up being season 1 art, which the rest is history. You know?
I mean, that's pretty amazing. So I do have one last question for you. My question is this. If someone watching this and sees this and is inspired by you, what do they have to do to come get a job and work with Peter Stark?
Oh man. Well, that's a great question, and I'm not going to skirt it, but let's say, what do they need to do to have success in this career? And if that means crossing my path, amazing. But I think, you know, what I've learned along the way is be real. And if you have to go deeper than that, it's just like,
I'm gonna need more than that.
What's that?
I'm gonna need more than that.
Yeah. No, but honestly, like, find your passion and be real, and because, you know, like, the business we're in can be superficial, like inherently superficial.
Gotcha.
And so, like, what I'm looking for in particular when I meet people, you know, like, oftentimes I'm meeting people that have no book, they have no experience, no real resume to speak of. That's how I got started.
Okay.
Like, the first guy that hired me, you know, hired me based on my resume and the fact that we were from the same state, and he gave me a chance, and that's all it took, right? And I took it and worked my ass off to, you know, but I really had, you know, he really just connected with me on a level that was beyond any sort of work or experience that I had. So, you know, I really, like, if people can communicate, if I can feel that realness and I can feel the genuine, like, passion, you know, we were talking about this earlier too, like, sometimes I'm more inspired by what, you know, I just hired a woman she's got a punk rock band, and they do really cool stuff, and it's like, obviously being a punk rock musician doesn't translate to being a graphic designer, but from a life experience point of view, it does. So, in a weird way. So, like, for me, I'm looking for people that are passionate, that are genuine, can communicate, because what we do is, it's everything we do is about communication, right? Like, and so if you can communicate to me and I can feel the real you when you're talking to me, I'm typically going to put more stock in that than whether or not your resume has any typos in it, or, you know, the work that you did in college is exciting, or whatever. So, but I think that transcends, you know, like, not every person you're going to do an interview with is going to have the same point of view or a similar point of view of me as me, but, like, I do think that the ability to communicate and the ability to really express yourself is really the foundation of what we do. And that's going to be, if you can do that on a person-to-person, heart-to-heart level, you can probably do that on a pushing pixel level.
Gotcha. Well, I think that pretty much sums it up. Thank you so much for being on the Social Studies Show and just sharing your impartial talent and insight. I think that's a wrap.
Cool.
There you go, man. You got an opinion? We'd love to hear it. Leave a comment down below and hit the like button to subscribe.